and always makes his movies not just with a lot of gore, but with something to say. On your feet, Mr. George A. Romero.
Yeah! Woo! Yeah!
Thank you. Oh, you sexy thing. He even brought the trademark glasses for the occasion.
Yes!
Yeah. So here we are again.
How long?
How long have you been making these friggin' movies?
Too long.
So 1968 starts with Night of the Living Dead. I don't think there's a single soul in this entire planet that's not familiar with that movie. And it comes out, and it probably has one of the biggest impacts on motion picture history ever, right? Did you ever, when you're making that thing, because before that you're doing commercials, okay? Let's talk about, you make this movie and then shit goes nuts, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, it didn't happen right away. I mean, it was, when it first came out, it played drive-ins and neighborhood theaters and went away, and we thought it was gone forever. And I was actually working on my third film when it got rediscovered. And by the French, there's a French magazine called Cahiers du Cinéma.
By the French?
By the French. And it was me and Jerry Lewis at the time, I think. Actually, I think they thought this was one of Jerry's movies. And then it just took off. And I don't know, the rest has been just exciting.
So, I mean, the movie comes out, and again, it's rediscovered a while later. When did you know you wanted to make another one? When did you say, all right, it's time for a Dawn of the Dead now?
Well, it took me, at first I just resisted it because I didn't want to sort of get stuck in the genre. And then...
Oops.
This may be the wrong place to say that. I wanted to make one, a jungle action movie. People going down the Amazon in a schooner, ducking those poison darts. That was my dream as a kid, to make one of those. Couldn't do that in Pittsburgh, though.
No jungles.
No jungles. There's a river, but it's kind of yucky. Then, when people started to write about Night of the Living Dead like it was important, it was some kind of essential American cinema, then I really said, boy, I can't do another one of these unless I have a really good idea. And so I resisted again for several more years. And it was just by accident. I socially knew the people that were developing this big shopping mall, the Monroeville Mall. And I went out to visit before it was even open and saw all these trucks coming in bringing everything that an American could possibly want. And that's what gave me the idea. Seeing this, it was the first shopping mall. Now they're everywhere, right? This was the first one any of us had ever seen, first big indoor sort of temple to consumerism. And I said, here's an idea. And again, it was luck. I got a call from Dario Argento. This was purely by coincidence. A couple of weeks after I went and saw the mall, and I started to noodle some ideas. And Dario says, I think I have some money if you would ever seriously think about making another Dead film. And I said, it so happens that I just got this idea. And Dario said, come to Rome, come. And brought me to Rome, stuck me in an apartment, and said, right. First time anything like that ever happened to me. So I'm in this beautiful apartment in Rome, and I'm sitting there with, actually, manual typewriter, and wrote the script. And Dario was good to his word. He came up with the first money, and then we were able to match that money in the U.S. and make the film.
And now, Night of the Living Dead was huge, but then Dawn of the Dead. How many people here consider Dawn of the Dead to be like the epic of all zombie movies? And it's still never, even by your own standards, it's never been equal, you know? It's just one of those movies that's like a living, breathing entity. It means so many things to so many different people. And now, of course, for a third one, expectations are up here.
Yeah.
So you make the third one, and then it's really interesting. Tell us about when the third one came out.
Oh, well, when it first came out, people said, what the hell is this? nobody got it. They thought it was too dark. It wasn't Dawn. It wasn't, you know, this romp. It wasn't quite so. I think it is comic booky, but in a different way. It's darker. And people didn't get it at first. And it took years. We were just talking, Steve and I, back there, about, and I was disappointed in some of the reaction to Survival, the critical reaction. I know fans have been telling me they dig it, but you know, when it first came out, you know, critics were saying Romero should quit, get out of the business, he's lost the touch. But as Steve was saying, what happened today, it took several years. In fact, Mike Felcher was one of the first guys to blast it. He said, this movie sucks. And he wound up writing, like years later, the jacket notes for it, saying I was wrong. And this seems to happen to me a lot. It's like Roger Ebert, you know, was the guy that initially got all over my ass for Night of the Living Dead. And then when Dawn came out, he decided to get on the bandwagon and champion it. So I guess it takes my stuff a little while to catch on. But
you know, I think the genre as a whole has been playing catch up with you for the last 40 years.
Well, I don't know so much about that. It's just that I hope, it's nice to think that that might be true. I think it's just that every time I do one,
you can mail the check to me anytime.
I try to do them differently, and I think, you know, there's this mentality in North America, which is somewhat of a TV mentality. I mean, you know, people tune in to watch CSI, the same show every week. And it's like people want the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
I like to, it's more interesting for me and my fellow filmmakers if we switch it up and try to do something different with it. And sometimes that takes the audience by surprise a little bit, but it makes it a lot more fun for me. And I think eventually people come around and say, oh, I get it now. So it's been cool.
How many Led Zeppelin fans are here? Fuck yeah. Okay. Now, you have an album, Led Zeppelin, it's their debut album, and it's bitchin'. But can you imagine if the band decided just to release the same album again and give you more Led Zeppelin 1 and not change things up? We'd never have Stairway to Heaven, we'd never have all those classics. It's the same thing when it comes to George. George always makes the movie that he wants to make, and that's the most wonderful thing about him. It's his vision. It's always what he wants to do. And you know what? It's never taking away. Dawn is always going to be there. Day, which is much beloved now, fuck all those people who said it wasn't good. That's always going to be there. And he keeps making these movies, and he keeps giving you a different perspective on what's happening. One thing that you do more than anyone is you hold up the mirror to what's going on when you make a movie. And the sick thing is, like, everybody talks about, oh, this subtext, you know? It's the people who understand the subtext that already get it. You know what I mean? But what you do is, the people who don't get it, they watch these movies and finally they start catching on. You know, like, oh, that's a good fucking point. You know what I mean? So, I mean, when you're thinking about what you're trying to say, you specifically put in, like, okay, you say Dawn was consumerism, you know, survival's tribal warfare, you know, I mean, how much of that actually makes sense? How much would you like of it? Do you find yourself, well, I don't want to be so heavy-handed? What do you do when you're coming up with your next idea?
Well, you can't really be heavy-handed with it. You sort of try to just make it part of the fabric. I thought Land of the Dead I got a little too heavy-handed with it, but as a result, all of a sudden that movie got the best reviews I've ever gotten, because I think critics got it, you know, sitting there going, oh, I get this. I thought I was being way too obvious, you know. But, so, I don't know, I try not to really, you know, hit you over the head with it, but just make sure that it's in there. But it's always that idea that comes first before the story. Because the story can go 50 ways, you know. And the zombies come last. They're sort of the icing on the cake.
The zombies are never the problem. It's always the humans.
It's always the humans.
Because we fuck everything up.
Yeah.
You know, we really do. We ruin everything.